Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a personality type today that is fundamentally wired for depth, not for the surface.
Right.
And because of that, they often find themselves sort of on the periphery, misunderstood, maybe labeled as aloof.
That's a perfect way to frame it.
We are setting our sights on the analytical soul, the quiet truth seeker, the personality known in this framework as the number seven.
And when you really look at the research, the personal accounts on the seven, their whole identity is centered around this one critical mandate.
Which is
They must observe first, they have to
Mhm.
understand deeply, and only then, after all that, will they act. And even then, it's selective.
So that's the architecture that creates this profound wisdom, but it's
Uh,
also, like you said, the root of a really deep structural loneliness.
Exactly. It's not a superficial choice for them to be alone. It's almost a necessary condition for their functioning.
So our mission today is really to take you inside that internal landscape. We're going to explore the core themes that define them: understanding, meaning, inner authority, and of course, that crucial requirement for solitude.
Yeah, and our goal is to really clarify the distinction that defines a seven's health. I mean, understanding the difference between their necessary processing time, what we call solitude, which is fuel for them,
Right.
and that toxic, harmful emotional withdrawal that just leads to isolation. And that's poison.
We'll get into their mental patterns, why their whole approach to work is about mastery, not money, and what that path looks like from being a detached observer to becoming a really influential integrated advisor.
So let's start right at the source,
Mm.
their inner world.
Hmm.
If you are A7, or you know one, this feeling might be very familiar. The sources describe their internal state as just constant active observation.
And it's not just, looking around. It's more like having this elaborate security system running perpetual diagnostics in the background of your mind, perpetually scanning patterns, questioning motives, running a check on reality.
That active questioning is the key. It's an engine that's always asking, does this make sense? Is this logical? Is this actually true?
They're natural system critics, then, always looking for coherence.
Exactly. And because they're so tuned into anomalies, into inconsistencies, it often generates these constant internal feelings like, something isn't adding up here.
Or that classic feeling of, I don't really belong here in all this chaos.
That feeling of existential misalignment,
Hmm.
it's just a constant undercurrent for them.
And if that system is running all the time, it's generating a massive amount of data,
It is.
which brings us right to their need for quiet. For a lot of people, quiet time is a preference, something nice to have.
It's a luxury.
A luxury, yeah. But the research is really emphatic on this.
Mm.
For the seven, solitude is not a preference, it is how they reset their overloaded nervous system.
It's maintenance, pure and simple. If a seven is deprived of this decompression time, the negative consequences are almost immediate.
How's
They become severely overstimulated, highly irritable,
Mm-hmm.
and and this is the worst part, they get disconnected from their own anchor
The
point.
system crashes.
The system crashes. Think about that security system we mentioned. If the data feed never ever stops, eventually you're going to get a blue screen.
Right.
If you're a seven, you know that physical and mental stress of just being saturated by noise until you literally can't hear your own thoughts anymore. You need the quiet to filter it all out.
That's so compelling because it explains so much about how a seven appears in social settings.
It does.
Even when they're physically there, a part of them is always standing a little bit apart, watching the room, observing the dynamics.
And that internal distance, that really affects how the external world sees them. They come across as quiet, intelligent, reserved,
Even mysterious.
and very mysterious. And this is where the big communication breakdown happens. People project their own assumptions onto that silence,
They say things like, you're always in your head, or you seem so cold.
which raises a really important question. Is the seven intentionally hiding? Are they being emotionally withholding?
Well, that sounds like a defensive posture, but if they're mainly seekers of truth, the source material must suggest it's more active than just passive hiding, right?
Absolutely. They're filtering, not hiding. That's the key distinction.
Filtering.
The seven only really speaks when something feels true, precise, and necessary to add to the understanding. If they haven't finished that diagnostic check, they'll just stay silent.
So there's this huge gap between the volume of information they're processing inside and the tiny fraction they actually choose to say out loud.
An enormous gap. And that filtering mechanism is what creates the external perception of them being detached or emotionally distant.
Okay, let's get into that engine then, the analytical mind that powers the seven.
Mhm.
What's the composition of their core thinking process? The patterns we're seeing are analytical, deeply skeptical, highly symbolic, and philosophical.
They're natural truth seekers, pattern recognizers, the ultimate system critics.
And because their highest value is clarity and precision, they naturally reject anything that gets in the way of that.
Oh, absolutely. The research lists very specific things they just can't stand.
Like what?
Things like blind belief, which bypasses analysis, emotional manipulation, which just confuses the facts, groupthink, which, prevents independent thought.
And probably shallow explanations.
Oh, that's maybe the worst of all. Shallow explanations that skip over the necessary depth. They are intellectually allergic to the superficial.
I find this so counterintuitive when you look at how success is modeled today. It's
Right.
all about speed and constant momentum.
Right.
But the seven deliberately operates with this fundamental slowness to act. They'd rather withhold action entirely than act on an incomplete or flawed understanding.
That deliberate pause is fundamental to their mastery. It's everything. The seven will always prioritize precision over momentum.
Why is that?
They're terrified of the cost of error, the cost of having to backtrack, the cost of being wrong just because they were rushed.
So wait and be right rather than move fast and be wrong.
Exactly. It makes them incredibly precise and masterful in their chosen field. But it absolutely explains why they're often slow to move in environments that require, rapid gut-feeling decisions.
They need to complete the diagnostic check first.
Before they engage the system, yes.
So when they're looking for a career, it has to feed them intellectually. Work for a seven must involve thinking, understanding, insight, strategy,
Complex depth.
complex depth. Yeah. You'll often find them thriving in roles that demand systematic investigation.
Things like research, data analysis, complex systems, advanced tech, strategy development.
Advisory roles, writing,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And conversely, they struggle profoundly when their mind is suppressed.
management.
Oh, the worst. Micromanagement, chaotic workplaces, and crucially, any task that is repetitive or seems meaningless, it will just drain them instantly.
And this really clarifies their relationship with wealth, which can seem a bit analytical.
Right.
The seven doesn't chase money for its own sake. They chase understanding and mastery. Money feels safer when the underlying systems are completely understood.
They see money almost as an intellectual project.
An equation to solve.
In a way, yeah. They're inherently suspicious of financial hype, high-pressure sales, or anything that demands blind, fast financial action. Their comfort doesn't come from having stuff. It comes from intellectual control.
The ability to predict logical outcomes.
If they understand the system, they feel secure. It's as simple as that.
We've established that the sevens lives largely in their head, filtering and observing reality. But connection, that requires vulnerability and emotional flow. So how does this analytical focus complicate the world of relationships for them?
Well, they love quietly, but with a really profound depth.
So it's not about grand gestures.
No, not at all. They express love not through dramatic overtures or constant verbal praise, but through their core strengths.
Which are?
Listening deeply, showing incredible loyalty, providing that space for understanding, and just offering a thoughtful presence. I mean, if a seven is truly listening to you, analyzing what you're saying, that is their highest form of affection.
But those external dynamics, the constant closeness, emotional drama, and that dreaded pressure to open up.
Those create massive friction for the seven. Massive.
Because when emotions spike, their instinct is to...
Withdraw. Immediately. They go silent. They need that internal space to process the overwhelming sensory input.
Which, if you're their partner, could be interpreted as neglect or even punishment.
And that's the tragedy of it. But the sources are so clear on this. The silence is not a sign they don't care. It is an inability to feel clearly in all that noise.
They have to sort it out alone first.
They have to sort, categorize, and understand the feelings in isolation before they can even begin to articulate them externally in a coherent way.
So that silence is a necessary buffer. It's not a rejection.
Exactly.
But what happens when that necessary solitude, metastasizes? When it gets into the danger zone, the shadow state?
That's when the seven is wounded or stressed or just overwhelmed for too long. Their wisdom calcifies into pure detachment.
And solitude becomes toxic isolation.
That's it. They don't just process emotions anymore. They begin to intellectualize their emotions. They start treating their own sadness like a math problem to be solved, not a feeling to be experienced.
And they become cynical.
Cynical, distrustful of everyone, and they aggressively avoid any and all vulnerability.
They stop engaging with the world and just watch it from a distance. So what are they truly afraid of when they retreat into that fortress of the mind?
Their greatest fears are all linked to a loss of control and precision,
Such as?
being misunderstood. That invalidates all their efforts at clarity, being exposed emotionally, which feels like a total loss of their internal structure.
And losing inner control.
That's the fundamental fear, that if they let their analytical guard down, the chaos and the messiness of feeling will just permanently overwhelm the beautiful, logical order of their mind.
So how does the journey pivot? How does the number 7 move from being that trapped observer, keeping all their clarity to themselves, to becoming a genuinely influential advisor who actually shapes the world around them?
Well, the path to maturity doesn't eliminate the need for solitude. That need is always there.
Right.
But the mature 7 learns to return from it. They share their insights instead of hoarding them because they realize hoarding information is just intellectual stagnation.
They learn to communicate their feelings more simply.
Yes, maybe just saying, I am feeling overwhelmed, instead of analyzing the feeling for 3 days in silence.
Yeah.
And they learn to trust selectively. They realize connection is the only real path to growth.
Here is what feels like the absolute central pivot point. The moment the 7's entire operating system has to be upgraded.
How on?
It's the understanding that insight is not complete until it is applied.
That's the leap to action. That is the most important lesson they have to learn. Action clarifies understanding.
Explain that.
The unhealthy 7 suffers from analysis paralysis. They wait for 100% certainty, which, never comes.
Of course not.
The integrated 7 realizes that waiting for perfect data is actually a form of self-sabotage. They have to test their theories in the messy real world.
Action provides feedback.
Vital feedback loops that solidify their understanding and turn knowledge into actual wisdom.
If the 7 never acts, they're just a library of unproven theories.
Exactly. When they make that leap, their influence shifts entirely. They stop being the silent critic in the corner.
And they start operating as essential advisors.
Powerful guides, master strategists, quiet authorities, their wisdom finally circulates. A 7 who stays in isolation becomes stagnant and cynical.
But a 7 who integrates becomes profoundly influential.
Because they bring not just theory, but proven understanding to the table. We can really simplify their entire path to mastery down into 5 essential lessons that every mature 7 has to embody.
Okay, let's make sure those stand out for the listener. These are the most valuable takeaways from our whole deep dive.
First and foremost, solitude is fuel, but isolation is poison.
Okay.
Second, feelings are data points that must be processed, not just distractions to be avoided.
Right, they're not the enemy.
Third, action clarifies understanding. Waiting for 100% certainty is just paralysis. Fourth, trust can be selective, but it can't be absent. You need some vulnerability for relational depth.
And the 5th.
The 5th is the culmination of all their work. Wisdom must circulate to stay alive and useful.
That really does map the entire arc of the number 7. They begin as this detached observer, constantly running a diagnostic check on reality, always asking, does this make sense? And they end as the influential advisor who understands that their clarity, their precision, their insights, they're only completed and the system is only fully understood through real-world informed application.
It's the journey from the theoretical realm of the mind into the messy, practical reality of impact.
So if we connect this lesson to your life, to you, the listener, here's a final provocative thought to mull over as you integrate this deep dive.
If wisdom stagnates when it's hoarded, and the 7 finds their true power in action, what single small truth are you holding back from applying in your own life? And what action, maybe even right now, might clarify your own understanding of that truth?